Up on the top, can you put up your hands if you can hear me? A little bit? If I yell? How's that? Okay. That's me. I am not a judge anymore. I'm a retired judge. But that's important because as a judge, I made many decisions, several decisions that we're concerned with. And as a lawyer before that, many years working with municipalities that were concerned with governance and public engagement. I believe that the reason that I am here is that staff hope that you would respect, not me, because you don't know me, but that experience, and that would allow you to, or allow me to try and help you have a reasonable, a constructive, and an organized meeting. I want to begin by pointing out to you that this is not a meeting of a council. No decisions are going to be made. There are a couple of councillors here. They are here like you to listen. This is an opportunity for you to interact with the staff, for you to talk to them, and for them to talk to you. I'm just going to begin with this. It is undeniable that in our society, there are people for whom life is a struggle. Many of us have struggles in life. One of those groups are the people who, when it gets dark, have nowhere to go. The homeless. Every level of government has a role to play in addressing that issue. The Region of Durham has done a lot of work, first of all, identifying the nature of the problem and preparing a plan which, at least looking at what I've been given to read, looks to me like a pretty comprehensive plan. The proposal for 1635 Dundas is part of that plan. We know that many of you are opposed to that proposal. This is your opportunity to engage with the staff, to explain to them your concerns, and for them to tell you their views and ideas to see whether your concerns can be met, and if so, how. If there are questions asked this evening which the staff can't respond to, then we're going to have your names and your addresses, and they'll do some work, and they'll give you an answer at some point, we hope, in the future. Now, we're going to begin this with a presentation by the staff explaining to you what the proposal is. It may be that you're going to hear some things that you don't agree with. I expect that's what's going to happen. It will not help for you to try and interrupt that presentation or to, as a group, start booing or hissing because there's something that you don't like. What we want to do is to explain to you the background and the proposal so that you will understand how it was developed and the thinking that went into it. I am asking you, please, don't interrupt, don't interject. At the end of this part of the process, there will be plenty of opportunity for you to comment, to ask questions. When we get to that point, I'm going to have just a few things to say about how we want to organize that part of the meeting. But for the moment, I want to just say this. We know that if this is a constructive and helpful meeting, that maybe 90 minutes won't be enough to hear all your concerns. So if things go well, we could probably prevail on the staff to stay a little bit longer so that we can hear more of you. Right? Okay.
Thank you very much, Justice. I hope everybody can hear me. And good evening. My name is Elaine Baxter-Trahair, and I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Region of Durham. Thank you all very much for joining us here tonight and for attending in person or watching this community engagement session via our live stream. I'm joined tonight by 3 other members of the panel who will provide parts of this presentation. At the far end of the table is Jason Hunt, the Regional Solicitor. Beside me is Stella Danos-Papaconstantinou, the Commissioner of Social Services, and the middle, Iain De Jong, President and CEO of Org Code Consulting. I'd also like to welcome the Chair, the Mayor, and members of Council who have joined us tonight. Thank you. Before we get started, I wanted to provide context about the state of homelessness in Durham. Homelessness is growing across the country, and Durham Region is no exception. According to data from the region's by name list, 331 individuals are experiencing homelessness in 2023 compared to 134 in 2017. There was a 67% increase in just 1 year, and we suspect there are substantially more homeless individuals in the community that we are unaware of at this time. There are many life circumstances that can bring someone to be in crisis without a place to call home. This could be a family breakdown, abuse, job loss, addictions, or mental health challenges. It can also be seniors or families who rely on social assistance and are now unable to afford their bills. Regardless of the circumstances, when someone finds themselves in crisis, they do need our support. The Region of Durham is legislated by the province to support people experiencing homelessness. The region is the service system manager for housing and homelessness and designated by the federal government as the community entity. The region is responsible for housing system planning, program management, funding that meets all housing needs of Durham residents, and this includes shelter and supportive housing, and oversight of the homelessness support system. To meet the needs in the community, Regional Council directed staff to purchase 1635 Dundas Street, the facility, to do the repairs necessary to ensure that it's ready for a 45-bed, low-barrier shelter by winter. I should be clear, there is only part of the building under construction at this point, and that is the part that would support 45 individuals. In the immediate short term, the facility will be used to provide low-barrier shelter services to approximately 45 individuals while the community consultation and engagement process is underway. Initial remediation activities include deep cleaning and disinfection, painting, floor repairs, and the installation of fencing and security measures. Processes will also be implemented to support this use, including procedures to address inquiries and concerns from the community. Once a longer-term vision for the facility is established through the engagement and consultation work that we are currently undertaking, a comprehensive renovation retrofit plan will be developed and included in future capital budget requests, not only for the region, but also for our provincial and federal partners. This direction was sought from the Council since the costs of a new building would far exceed the purchase and repair of the 1635 Dundas facility. The details of the purchase are available to the public on durham.ca. Before I turn it over to Jason, I want to highlight a few key facts about 1635 Dundas. The region takes a proven housing-first approach to address homelessness. Housing-focused sheltering aims to make homelessness as brief as possible and be part of the solution to ending homelessness. 1635 Dundas will open with 45 shelter beds to help meet the community's urgent need ahead of the winter. The site is on a major transit line and costs significantly less, as I said, than the cost of building a new facility. And by way of that, you may have seen at their last council meeting, the cost of our new long-term care facility that will be under construction in Seaton is now $162 million. The site will remain open during the day, allowing people to stay inside and work towards their goals instead of having to go outside. This is different from warming centers and other shelters because there is space to accommodate these individuals and to provide them with the supports that they need during the day. Wraparound supports will be there on opening day to help people achieve their goals, and Stella will talk more about this shortly. I'd like now to turn it over to Jason Hunt, the Regional Solicitor, for comments about the region's responsibilities under the Human Rights Code. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Elaine. And my apologies if I'm a bit nervous tonight, but I've got the regional chair on this side of me, my boss, the regional CAO here. And when I look up, I see a retired judge. So it's like a lawyer's worst nightmare. So I want to start out by saying some of what I have to say may be difficult for some of you in the room to hear, and I just want to acknowledge that. You can see on the slide there that as recently in our history as the 1950s, in Canada, a developer could put a clause in your deed that would prevent people of specific races or specific religions from owning property. So some of you may have heard the term people zoning, and that is what people zoning is. In Ontario, the government, the Human Rights Commission for Ontario, and the Supreme Court of Canada have all made very clear statements which outlaw all forms of people zoning. You can see those statements on the slide. So generally, as residents, we get to choose our neighborhoods, but we don't get to choose our neighbors. And can you switch the slide, Stella? Thank you. So I'm going to just try to connect that directly to the context of housing. So that would include shelter and supportive housing, publicly funded and affordable housing, as well as rental housing. So many of the forms of housing you're going to hear Stella speak about tonight. The Ontario Human Rights Code specifically prohibits discrimination in the provision of housing. So the slide shows there some but not all of the forms of discrimination that are prohibited in the code. And in addition to the Human Rights Code, it's been accepted in our courts that someone who is racialized, who lives with a disability, or who's in receipt of social assistance is more likely to experience homelessness or some form of housing instability. The courts and the Human Rights Commission have clearly directed that this type of housing must be provided in a manner that's free from discrimination. Placing additional barriers for these projects that don't exist for other forms of housing is discrimination. The Human Rights Code itself is a constitutional document. So what that means to us as lawyers, but also for your counselors, is that it prevails over any provincial legislation and it prevails over any municipal bylaw. Staff like myself and the others you see here at this table, regional counselors as a whole, and even individual counselors are all bound by the Human Rights Commission and can be found in violation of the Human Rights Code. I think I live in Whitby. All of you, I'm guessing, also live in Whitby. We've seen homelessness. We've seen encampments in our community. And frankly, in my experience in dealing with the community, I don't think there's a single person in this room that would wish for someone to live outside in the winter, and particularly in Canada. But the courts have made it quite clear that if we are serious about addressing this most troubling aspect of homelessness, then we must demonstrate that we have adequate shelter space for people who are being displaced by parks or public spaces when we are trying to address encampments. So your regional representatives are here to help. The regional staff are here to follow those directions. Today, we all want to hear from you directly. I'm asking you also to keep an open mind on the other perspective, and that is that as a municipal government, my client cannot engage in people zoning. It's not legal and it's not right. But there are solutions. Maybe it's not the solution that you came here for, but keep an open mind. As a government, my client has many tools to address your concerns. We just have to use the right ones.
I'll take it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'll do. I'm good. Thank you very much and good evening. Thank you for being here this evening and for those who are watching and listening. My name is Stella Danos-Papaconstantinou, and I'm the Commissioner of Social Services here at the Region of Durham. And as Elaine mentioned, we are the Service System Manager on behalf of the Region of Durham. It is a core business function of the department to plan and establish needed shelter to meet homelessness demand. The current homeless profile in Durham includes individuals living in public spaces, ravines, tents, and couch surfing. We are aware of people living in their cars, including seniors and families with children. Chronically homeless for the purpose of this and any of the discussion today is anybody who's been homeless for more than 6 months. Durham's shelter system has been at capacity for over a year, and without the creation of new shelter beds, the homeless population will increase. People living without shelter are vulnerable and lack opportunity to meet daily living needs. The longer someone lives without shelter, it becomes more challenging to move out of the homelessness system. Oh, I can't do it, okay. To address the complexities within the current homelessness support system, we need to establish both immediate safe space for people living unsheltered and plan for long-term housing. 1635 Dundas Street will address both immediate homelessness needs and create long-term housing solutions for these residents. Phase 1 involves an immediate step toward addressing current homelessness, a 45-bed emergency shelter for those who choose to access the shelter. Low barrier access means that those with health, medical, mental health needs, and part of the 2S LGBTQI community will have access, and support staff will be available at the shelter. Phase 2 of 1635 Dundas Street will help meet long-term housing needs. Planning and consultation will determine the options of transitional housing and/or supportive housing. The by name list provides data to us on local homelessness trends and activity, and it also helps to identify specific housing needs for individuals and/or their families. The by name list is not an exact total, as people are required to give consent, and we are working to develop a more accurate identified data source and reporting mechanism. Once community feedback is completed, then a long-term plan for housing solutions can be established and shared back to the community. The Dundas Street Emergency Shelter will be overseen by the Region of Durham Social Services Department. This includes site visits, ensuring standards are met, and service reporting on outcomes. Operations will be in partnership with the service provider who will be providing 24/7 staffing. Operations of the shelter must meet standards and adopt best practices. This shelter area will allow space for people to sleep and meet daily living needs, along with programming and support. There will be provisions for safety and security, and all intake procedures for all individuals and service assessments completed to prioritize support needs. A shelter is not a warming center. A warming center provides temporary shelter from cold weather. A shelter provides a bed, meals, support services, and day programming. Wraparound supports services will be established at 1635 Dundas, meaning that people's individual needs can be met through on-site services. Having accessible supports helps to mitigate further crisis and vulnerability for people, and then planning to attain long-term housing, treatment, medical care, or return to their family. Wraparound services include health services, addiction counseling, mental health support, financial services, employment, life skills programming, and other things. Weapons, violence, or abuse of any kind are not permitted in the shelter. Safety is a priority for all, staff, individuals, and families. Safety measures currently planned for the site include a 10-foot privacy fence surrounding the property and lighting installed. Cameras will be installed and security guards on site 24/7, support staff on site. For any criminal behavior, DRPS will be called using established protocols. A Dundas Street Liaison Committee is being established with representation by regional staff, community members, local business, service providers, and people with lived experience. A call out for members has gone out and the application process closed on September the 27th. A terms of reference will be established. The purpose of the liaison committee is to share information, communicate neighborhood concerns, and support mitigation strategies to support the successful integration of this project and its residents within the broader Whitby community. We intend to seek out solutions for building strong, positive community relations and to establish communications protocols between the community, the region, and service provider. Some actions since August till the end of December include the installation of site safety measures, the doors for entrance and egress, setup of the site, security systems and cameras, fire safety plans, and fire systems. Renovations to address immediate needs, including external site work and internal retrofits to flooring, walls, and lighting. Fencing, land surveying is completed currently, and installation will be done prior to move-in. An expression of interest for the community partner has gone out, and we will be looking after that towards the end of this month. And the establishment of the Community Liaison Committee will also happen by the end of this month. We'll be sending out an application form with the draft terms of reference to all those who've expressed interest. And we expect to start this program November, December of this year. This includes my portion of the presentation, and now turn it over to the next presenter. Iain De Jong is a prominent consultant, researcher, and thought leader on homelessness. He is the president of CO and Orcode Consulting, Inc., the author of the book on ending homelessness. Iain's work takes him throughout Canada, the United States, Australia, and parts of Europe, where he has evaluated, helped develop, improved, and toured hundreds of homeless shelters. Having held leadership positions in the public sector, nonprofit sector, and private sector, Iain is intimately familiar with the range of perspective on homelessness and has also been an expert witness on the matters related to homelessness in the U.S. federal court proceedings. Iain is no stranger to Durham Region, serving as a resource to social services and having led the extensive review of Durham's homelessness system in 2022. Iain, thank you.
Thank you, Stella, and good evening, everybody. I'd like to share some thoughts on what adequate shelter looks like and to provide some information on what really is best practice and evidence-informed practice in the delivery of shelter services. It has certainly been my experience in my work throughout the country, the United States and Australia in particular, that the actual reality of how shelters operate and perceptions and assumptions about how shelters operate can be different. I hope to shed some light to help inform your ongoing communication and deliberation with the region. So it's been mentioned that we did a review of the homelessness and housing support system. This started late in 2021 and was finished in December of 2022. What we found in conducting that research through our engagement with a broad range of interested and affected parties and looking at rather robust data sets was that the region really needs at least 200 additional shelter beds by the end of 2026. And if we look at where people are concentrated in the region who are experiencing homelessness and where inflow is happening from points in the region, we need at least 140 of those beds located in Oshawa, Ajax, and or Whitby. As part of the development of the plan, we conducted an open survey, which had over 400 responses. And in looking at the survey data that came in from a broad range of interests across the region, found that 78% of respondents indicated the shelter beds should be expanded throughout Durham Region. We also know, based upon our work in developing the plan and evaluating what was happening in the community, that the expansion of shelter services was supported by the steering committee, which was made up of a broad range of interested and affected parties, not just in the homelessness sector and not just government employees. We also conducted a large number of key informant interviews made up of representatives from the nonprofit sector, healthcare providers, people with lived experience, law enforcement, and community volunteers who are all supportive of shelter expansion. So let's talk for just a moment around the state of homelessness beyond just the data that has been shared in our introductions. The first is, we know with absolute certainty it occurs throughout the region, from the north parts of the region through the south, and both boundaries on the east and west. We do know that there are higher concentrations in some parts of the region, but that no part of the region is immune to homelessness. In our work throughout the country, we definitely have seen homelessness on the rise. A lot of this is attributed to the fallout and impacts of the pandemic. And we continue to see that the rapid changes in the affordable housing sector and rental housing sector, I should say, including the affordable housing sector, has made homelessness much more prevalent for people who are experiencing economic hardship at this time. It impacts thousands of Canadians daily. Those estimates from esteemed researchers range anywhere from about 260,000 to over 500,000 Canadians experiencing homelessness daily. And while it might seem like an intractable problem, we do know that homelessness can be solved through appropriate housing and professional supports. This happens on a per person, per couple, or per family basis. There are communities throughout the country that have functionally ended veterans homelessness. There's one community that has ended chronic homelessness, and there are communities that have experienced long-term reductions in homelessness. To be clear, the best response to homelessness through appropriate housing and professional supports is not charitable do-goodery. It actually requires a highly trained, skilled staff who are able to effectively engage in interventions with the population to help them realize housing and appropriate supports over the long term. That high-functioning, evidence-informed system of care to get better results means that the nonprofit service providers, along with the region, are not just using their best guess. If we think about evidence-informed systems of care, there's quite a collection of data elements that go into it, as well as an examination of existing research, and in particular, control group studies that show one type of intervention exceeds that of another. To that end, I would argue that homelessness is well understood by both staff and service providers across the region because of that volume of data collected. Most of this data goes into something called into a database that's required for submitting reports to both the province of Ontario and the government of Canada for funding. We also know that the by names list provides us very in-depth knowledge of those individuals who have provided consent and are interested in housing, and there are various sector committees that continue to work on different aspects of the issue. But more often than not, while the experience of homelessness for the individual couple or family can be miserable, it is met with quite a bit of stigma and discrimination as well, that people experiencing homelessness are seen as less than. We pathologize homelessness, we label homelessness. But what we've come to appreciate in my decades of work and the research of many others is that homelessness is really the fault of systems, not the fault of people. And while we point to certain behaviors within the homeless population, the reality is those same behaviors are found in housed populations and often at a higher rate. I would say, for example, that while homelessness and addiction are often linked together, statistically, someone with an addiction in this community is more likely to be housed and are more likely to already be your neighbor or a family member. And homelessness only happens to 3 types of people. And that is to say that if we don't humanize our response to homelessness, if we don't recognize that every single person is not a problem, that they are potential, that we'll continue to otherize, which will have even more serious negative impacts potentially on the person's trauma, health, and wellness. Shelters, and in particular the sort of shelter that's being imagined in the community, is emergency accommodation. That means that the immediate needs of people relative to hygiene, clothing, food, a place to sleep, access to professional staff are all available. But it's not enough to just provide a roof over someone's head and to meet their food needs on a daily basis. What we've come to appreciate through our work on housing-focused shelters is that shelters play a critical role in helping people realize permanent housing. And while we might look at the lack of affordable housing and the scarcity of housing, rental accommodation in particular, across the region, we do know that homelessness for individuals that move into housing can be permanently ended through effective supports. We also look to the community to continue to prioritize who gets access to available housing using the by names list and other appropriate data. Shelters are voluntary. There is no mechanism to force people to use shelter, and there's no mechanism to force people to stay in shelter 24 hours a day. That said, with robust programming inside the shelter and the lining up of the opening of the shelter when the weather gets colder, I would certainly suggest that most people will stay inside for large volumes, if not most of the day. And the phenomenon of shelters is not new to the region. It's not just an Ontario thing. There are over 400 permanent homeless shelters providing more than 16,000 beds nightly across the country. They are in all different types of communities, from large urban centers to smaller rural and small town communities. They are often a range of built forms, and many are not dissimilar from taking an existing built form and converting it to something new, as is the case here. The phrase low barrier has been used, and that can make people feel nervous because low barrier perhaps sounds to some as if it's anything goes. The reality is low barrier is not no barrier. A low barrier simply means we look at the needs of the most vulnerable community members, and we ask ourselves if those really vulnerable community members have the ability to get access to that shelter to receive the services that the shelter is offering. It means, though, that certain behaviors are never going to be permitted within shelter, such as violence or threats of violence, sexual harassment or sexual violence, theft, excessive damage to property, arson, or drug dealing on site. Sure. Shelters are monitored on a regular basis. And so they don't exist in a vacuum or in isolation. And even nonprofit service providers are subject to being accountable to a broad range of stakeholders, up to and including their funder. So it's the sort of things that are examined on a regular basis in the shelter are things like, is the shelter provider able to help people secure income, help them access things like lost birth certificates, help them with housing, whether that's reunification with family or friends, or looking for independent housing in the community, help accessing mental health services and to some degree navigating those services, access to addiction services, health services. The service manager examines turnaways. This is how, in addition to knowing that shelters have been full, we know that the volume of people seeking shelter services across the region surpasses available beds. The service manager also looks at service restrictions and service bans. Who's being asked to leave the shelter? Why are they being asked to leave the shelter? And for how long do they have to leave the shelter? They look at bed utilization patterns, which is everything from how many individuals will use a shelter for a very short period of time and never return to the shelter system again, and how many people are getting stuck within the shelter system and having prolonged experience of homelessness. Looking at unmet needs of the population served, and in particular, looking at other services and connections with other systems that can be helpful. Financial accountability, that they have to be accountable for the funds that are provided. Data collection, privacy, and data security. Public health matters such as decreasing disease transmission and safe food preparation. Adherence to shelter standards, which outline how shelters are supposed to operate. Training of shelter staff and making sure that training is current. Quality and maintenance of the building to make sure that there are no hazards or safety issues. An understanding of critical incidents, and more importantly, debriefing critical incidents to make sure they're not repeated. Grievance policies and responses for both shelter users as well as the broader community who might have issues with how the shelter is operating. Neighbor relations, and adherence to applicable legislation. So as I mentioned earlier, shelters are operated by trained professionals. And while shelters can provide a very robust environment and provide tremendous amounts of support and do the sort of things that Stella outlined in terms of things like fencing and lighting and security cameras, et cetera, the reality is people that use shelters are responsible for their own actions, just like all of us are responsible for our own actions. It is heartening to hear that there will be an ongoing committee to dialogue and problem solve relative to the shelter. And it's not uncommon for there to be opposition to a shelter. But what's the reality? So the first belief that I want to address is a belief that it will increase crime. And I would urge you to look at the peer-reviewed published literature in this regard, as well as studies from places like Vancouver, which studied 19 shelters from 2006 to 2019. And while they found slight increases in property crimes within 400 meters of the shelter, after the first year, there was no statistically significant relationship, and there was no increase in violent crime.
Okay, just wait. Please. I told you before, there will be a time for questions. Let the gentleman finish, please.
A belief that if children see homelessness, it will have a negative impact on them. This has been the first study that I'm aware of happened in 1993, has continued since then, and has not demonstrated any long-term negative impacts on children. A belief it will erode property values. So in this regard, there is some data to suggest that the size of the facility may have a relationship. But what is that size? The size of the facility in question is getting to several hundred beds, not 45 beds. And I encourage you to look at studies from New York University, Stanford, and the Urban Institute. And yes, as one example. And if you look at the New York study, you would find that they've been tracking this for over 30 years to look at trends in property values within 1,500 feet of facilities, and they found no statistically significant impact on property values. A belief it will be better in a different location. If we look at the aspects of this particular location, the key one would be access to transit, and that is really important for many of the individuals because they are unlikely to have vehicles. A belief it will increase drug use in the community, and in particular, while people who are at the shelter may live with addiction and have addictions before they went to shelter, and while there can be instances where people who are living with addiction are going to be staying in the shelter for a period of time, there isn't actually any study that shows increased drug use in the community. So there's usually a belief that somehow, and what we often hear is, we agree that there's a shelter, we agree that we need shelter, we agree we need to do something about homelessness, but it should be somewhere else. A belief that it will attract people from far away and people will be bussed in for the services. I can assure you that the region has enough people experiencing homelessness. And there's often beliefs that the shelter should screen potential shelter users, ensure none of them use drugs, live with mental illness, or have a history of conflict with the law, all of which would be potentially discriminatory. And the last point I want to make is related to encampments. I also know throughout this province and other provinces and territories that there's been a huge uptick in encampments, and that many residents are also displeased with seeing tents in public spaces. And I just draw your attention to earlier this year, where the Ontario Superior Court ruled that, and this was in Waterloo Region, but you could not evict or dismantle an encampment on public property because it would infringe upon people's right to liberty, life, and security of the person because of a lack of shelter space. The judge said that shelter beds have to be operational, available for the specific population group seeking shelter, and accommodating for the individual seeking shelter, and that shelter spaces cannot split couples, must provide supports, and must not impose any rule that cannot be followed due to addiction, and must accommodate mental or physical disability. Thank you.
I'll just note quickly before we get into the question period, I did see a number of you taking photos of the slides, which is great. Just wanted to let you know they will be posted on the project website immediately after the session, so you're welcome to go back and revisit and share at any time.
There we go. How many people have comments or have questions that they want to ask? Okay. There are really two sources of questions. First of all, people were told that they could write in and ask questions or provide questions even before the session began. I have a listing of them, so I have that source, and there's been some undertaking made that these questions would be answered because there's, I think, assumption that some of these people will be watching through the streaming service. So what I'm proposing to do is to alternate between one of the questions that's written and one of you. Now, the only thing I'm not certain about because of the numbers is how you want to organize this. We do have numbers. We can give you each numbers, or we can just see if you can organize yourselves around this as we go from one. I don't want to have a lineup of people here. I don't think that's going to help us at all. Pardon me? Bench to bench. Okay, fair enough. So we'll just work our way through the benches. Fair enough. All right. So I'm going to just start with one of the written questions. I'm going to ask you if you, when you ask a question, to please give us your name and your address. Remember, I said to you earlier that if the staff doesn't provide you, is not able to provide you with an answer, then we're going to want it to provide it to you later. If we don't have your name and your address, we can't do it. So it would be best if you gave us your name and your address each time before you comment. All right? Okay. The other thing I want to say to you is this. We did give some thought to setting a time limit when you're speaking because we want to hear from as many people as possible. But that's kind of arbitrary, and we've decided not to do it. But we would ask you to try and keep your comments within, let's say, 3 minutes. You can say a lot in 3 minutes. I don't have a stopwatch. I'm not going to keep time. Just like you to make some effort to remember that there are a lot of people here who want to speak, and we want to give as many as possible that opportunity. We don't want you to, if you can avoid it, repeat what's already been said. Once an objection's been established, not much is added by repeating it. And to the largest extent possible, we would prefer that you not start engaging in an argument with the staff. They're going to give you their best answer. You may not like the answer, but it will be the best one they can give you, and there's no reason to start an argument with them by disagreeing with what is the best answer they can give. It's just another way of taking up too much time. Now, I don't want to interrupt any of this, but I may have to because we want to try to keep this flowing and keep it organized. Please understand, I'm not doing it to protect anybody, particularly the members of the staff. I just want to see that this moves along in a reasonable pace, just a second please, in a reasonable pace so that we can get as many people speaking as possible. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a suggestion. How about that everybody just takes one question until we go through everybody, and then they can ask second, third, fourth questions after.
Well, why don't we,
For the sake of time, because otherwise.
I think we're going to be here until midnight if we do that, which may be okay with you, but eventually people get tired. I said to you earlier, no, I'm not going to engage in an argument with you about this, okay? I said to you earlier that we will extend the time, and we will. But we're going to do it when we get to 8 o'clock. We'll see how things are then, and we'll have a conversation, and we'll see whether or not we need to go further, okay? You're going to get, all right, let's not take up any more time. Let me start with the first question, okay? All right. This is a question from Stephanie McMillan. I don't know, Elaine, who's going to answer each of these questions. You'll have to direct them for me. I'm sorry. Okay, can you hear me if I do that? Yes. Okay. How will the shelter select its residents? Are there criteria or screening processes to mitigate the risks to the community?
Thank you for that question. We have intake processes in our shelter system. They're standard, but also each provider has their own set of intake questions. But the basic are, who you are, what your needs are, how long you've been homeless, and then there's an assessment tool that we go through to identify their health and mental health needs. And that's how people are received into the shelter.
All right, now if we proceed bench by bench, we're going to start right over here to see whether anybody, you have a question? Lady behind there? Then you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bernier, and I live on Regal Briar Street. So thanks for the presentation. I'll just give you a little bit of feedback. It's the first time that I feel like I actually have real information. So I speak for some of my friends and my neighbors when I say that it would have been good to have been given information proactively around this. But my question is about just a particular piece of the slide presentation, and that was around the wraparound services that you had mentioned. If you can provide us a little bit more information and what services or what professionals will be available on staff when the shelter actually opens.
So the operations of this shelter will be a partnership with a designated professional service provider, somebody who understands how to operate a shelter environment. The expression of interest has gone out, and we will go through that process and determine who that is.
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in now. We have processes for transparency within the government, and we are going through that process with a request for proposals. Now, Stella can answer your question in detail if you would just give her the time to answer. Thank you very much.
So in a shelter, services include meals, well, obviously a place to sleep, definitely housing plans. That is part of what being a housing focused shelter is. Health supports, mental health supports, life skills development, employment, and such programs and services.
So just, if I could just clarify, if you don't mind. So we don't know yet if there will be addiction counselors or social workers.
Yep.
Right now.
So that is part of the shelter. The shelter program includes addictions and mental health supports.
Excuse me,
That's
let me
correct.
just try and help this if I can. You've heard reference to wraparound services. That's what's being talked about here. All of these kinds of assistance that these people will require, as I understand, is intended to be there. You can't expect, it's not reasonable to expect in circumstances where government particularly is involved, that all of these issues will be resolved now. Government takes its time. There are certain requirements before people are hired. There are processes to be followed. You're going to simply have to wait. All right, I'm going to go to the next question. I beg your pardon, I can't, I'm sorry.
Can I ask one question, please?
No, I really do want to try and keep some order to this. All right? Please clarify the type of housing to be provided at 1635 Dundas. I would hope it follows a similar model to the renovations being done at 357 Simcoe Street South in Oshawa, where the Holy Cross School is being converted to 27 apartments for youth. I do not believe 1635 Dundas would be an overnight shelter where the homeless are turned out again in the morning and forced to come back later for another bed. This would lead to people wandering the streets and cause more concerns for the neighboring community. And that question was asked by Catherine Emerson.
Thank you very much. So this shelter is going to offer 24/7 supports. People will not be turned away in the morning. They will be remaining on site if they choose to continue with their programming.
Hello, my name is Deborah Schroeder. I live at 44 Waywell Street, which is actually only like a block south of here. I'm not in that community, but I support the community and what they're doing. In the report, A Renewed Homelessness and Housing Support Service System for the Regional Municipality of Durham, December 2nd, 2022, even the homeless want shelters that are safe for them by having separate shelters for people who use drugs or have mental illness. A low barrier shelter does not allow for that. Now, my question is, does anybody have an example of a low barrier shelter of this size in a residential neighborhood that is doing it right? No increase in violence, drugs, crime, 911 calls, where the community has not been negatively affected, because the examples that we've seen are Hamilton, Timmins, Whitehorse, Oshawa, the Delta, the Novotel, where communities are being very negatively impacted. And we've seen nothing from anybody showing, here's what can be done. Do you have an example of that? Because right now, without that example, why would anybody believe you?
So the question was similar size and in a residential neighborhood. So I think if we look to places like St. John's, Newfoundland, we see that most shelters are integrated into residential environments, many of which are low barrier. Things like Stella's is a really great example of an organization that has done really good work outreaching to the community, and that is just one example. I think if we look to places where we also have kind of more residential integration of shelters, where they've done some really fabulous things, I'm trying to think of something around like the 45 bed mark, but I definitely know of some that are a little bit larger that have done great work in that space. A lot of those examples are. I'm not going to answer a question if I keep getting interrupted, so.
Okay, the question, there is a you want me to try and help you out here? Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry, this is supposed to be an information sharing evening, and we are happy to answer respectful questions. If this continues, though, we will not.
All right. Ian, you're being asked whether or not you can give a specific example which has had the success that you've talked about and discussed.
I
Don't-
did provide
just
one
wait,
example, and I'd
just a
be
second,
happy to
just a
do
second,
research
just
on
a
more
second,
and
just a
provide a
second.
list.
Just a second. Just a second. Until you are all quiet, he's not going to answer the question. He's not going to answer the question until you're quiet. All right. Ian, just wait. Are you ready to finish now so we can answer the question?
Yeah, go. Answer it. He never did answer it.
No, he hasn't, because somebody's always talking. Quiet, please. Let him answer. Okay, Ian.
I provided one example, which was Stella's in St. John's. I also indicated that I could provide, because I don't remember every single shelter off the top of my head of similar size, we would prepare a list for the FAQs so that you can look at other shelter examples throughout the country of similar size that are, I would say, doing a very good job at community relations and neighbor relations, and to the best of my knowledge, do not have the sort of issues that have been expressed as people's comments.
All right, well, if you could provide that list, maybe you could do that to the staff, and it'll be distributed to, sorry, I've forgotten the lady's name. Deborah, okay? All right.
Can I suggest that we will put it on the site for the project, and everybody will be able to access?
And what is the site? Because I have no idea.
Okay, I'm going to, can you please provide me with some background information on homeless crisis? Oh, I should have said, I'm sorry, this is from Norbert Lee. Can you please provide me with some background information on homeless crisis in Whitby that Elaine Baxter refers to in her letter to Mayor of Whitby? Can you ask Elaine to quantify exactly, with numbers and relevant data, what is referred to as homeless crisis in Whitby?
Thank you, Justice. I'll ask Stella to jump in if I have misremembered the numbers. On the by name list, which is individuals experiencing homelessness that do want to find a home, there are at least 30 individuals from the Whitby area. There are a number of additional individuals in ravines, families and cars that we are unaware of. As we become aware of, we encourage them to get on the by name list. And with respect to families, they automatically go to the top of our priority list. But that is a material number, and this shelter will go a long way to addressing those issues.
Couple, or is there going to be children there? And like, oh, I'm sorry, one more thing too. So if I go into the shelter and I don't have anywhere to go and I'm using the resources to try to find housing, or I'm addicted or whatever the case may be, how long as a single person am I allowed to stay there? To like, what is the turnaround? And Like, 30 days, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you. So the average stay today in a Durham shelter is 21 days. From the moment somebody comes into the shelter, they are assessed, housing needs are discussed, a housing plan is put in place. If at the 30-day mark they don't have housing yet, they haven't left the shelter, everything is reassessed, all of it, their own personal assessment, their housing plan, and everything. You said couples, that's part of being a low barrier shelter, that today couples don't have places to stay together. They are split up, so we will have space for couples. Children, not in the first 45. We have to sort of evolve the program. As we renovate it and create opportunities, we could have, within the 45 number, families as well.
Okay, this is a question from Elaine Lufkens. She has several questions. I'm just going to read the first. What are each of the specific... Sorry, you can't hear me? I'm sorry, yeah, pardon me. What are each of the specific wraparound services that will be offered when the doors open? Will all services be in place before the first person moves in? Really? Apparently I've lost my way. Thank you. Let's try this one. Mike, no, I'm just not close enough to it. I don't want to get that affection with the microphone. Putting this enormous low barrier shelter right in the middle of our family neighborhood is not only incredibly inconsiderate to our community, but is also a dangerous hazard, especially to the many young children living in very close proximity. This is a perfect recipe for failure and neighborhood degradation. I would like to know how you would feel if the powers that be forced this on you where you live.
I will take that as CAO and just say that you don't know what's in your backyard many of the times. We're all living in communities that have youth shelters, halfway houses, and 99% of the time we're oblivious to them being there. And I'm speaking from personal experience myself. So I think we heard from Iain that the impact of shelters on neighborhoods is negligent. And that is something that we believe. And as we continue to implement best practices in this shelter, we are confident that we will have a facility that is a good community partner.
There's 10-foot halfway houses with murderers here in Whitby. Federal prisoners on parole.
But it's only 1 or 2, not 45.
Oh no, there's a lot more than 1 or 2 left. There's halfway houses here already.
My name is Judy Griffiths, and I live in Brooklyn. So I have a comment, first of all. The very first thing that I want to say is, I see that you guys all have ergonomically friendly chairs, but these benches suck. I have about 4 questions. I'm going to just say them all, and hopefully we can get answers from the particular people who have the answers. The first one would be, how much regional housing has been developed in the last 10 years? Because I heard that it was the fault of the systems, but our counselors are not focused on housing and have not been for many, many years. It was mentioned that you identified the nature of the problem of homelessness. When did staff identify the nature of this problem? Because it's been an ongoing thing for many years that has not been addressed properly by our council. The third question, I understand that this property was purchased for $13 million recently, but, oh, okay, so I have my, if you can confirm how much it was purchased by, I understand that it sold prior to you purchasing it for $8 million. So who was it purchased from, what the company name was, and who owns it, please? Thirdly, Who would have priority to these beds? Current homeless people in Whitby? Migrants coming in who haven't lived in Ontario or even Whitby? Those are the questions that I have. Thank you.
I will start with the real estate and just correct you that it was purchased for $13.7 million. Other aspects of the transaction are confidential, but the staff report outlining the purchase and the intended use was made public last week and again can be accessed on the Region's website in the page dedicated to this project. I'll now turn it over to Stella, who will answer the remainder of the questions.
Who will be staying in the shelter? Anybody who needs the shelter stay. So we do have Whitby residents homeless today. We're familiar with them. We're familiar with a number of them. There are many others who we are currently supporting who aren't even on our by name list. So if they choose to come into shelter, it is a choice, we will be there to support them. We are a system manager for the entire system of homelessness. All of our shelters are for everybody.
Will there be migrants brought in who have not lived in the area?
You want to take that one? Go ahead.
A shelter is emergency shelter. We don't look for the citizenship of the individuals accessing the shelter. And yes, there would be provided with access if there were space within the shelter to accommodate them. And we were able to address the needs that that individual would have.
Okay. This is a question from Gail Andrews. We are concerned the effect of hosting this shelter might have a negative impact on our property values. Is anything being done to mitigate this potential negative impact?
I believe Iain answered that question well in his presentation. There is very little or no data supporting that would happen. But again, with the operational plans and the programs that the region would put in place, we would expect that the shelter will have minimal impact in the surrounding community once it's fully operational.
I'm going to suggest that we jump up a couple of rows just so that we don't look like we are favoring people at the bottom end. Is that okay? All right. I'm going to go to the second last row. Gentlemen, you.
Hey, so my name's Stratton Finley. I live in the area. But that's not who I'm here for. I'm here for the residents under the John Street Bridge. I spent a lot of time with them and amongst the clouds of crack cocaine. It's, I want to see for myself. And I have read your wonderful 90-page report, as have many others here. And it's the entire basis for the expropriation of 1635 to begin with. Am I correct? That's all that was in the paperwork, is just the study that was conducted. There's a ton of discrepancies. Unfortunately, I don't have time to list them all, so I'll just pick one. How about transportation? You list that as a key need, and use that as a reason for 1635 when the majority of our homeless population, the largest chunk in Durham, is already where it is, downtown Oshawa, which also has way better transportation. Was any of that actually factored in, that the only real bus available is the 900?
First of all, I will clarify the building was not expropriated. It was purchased, and it was purchased based on our knowledge of the need to address homelessness and supporting housing requirements across the region. Yes, there is a large number of homeless individuals in downtown Oshawa. There is also a concentration of services for those individuals in downtown Oshawa. The reality is there is also a growing number of homelessness in Whitby, and that is what we are trying to address through the shelter. Although, as Stella said, we must take a region-wide perspective in terms of the services that we deliver, because we deliver them for the entire region.
Yes, of course. As I said, I spend time under there, so I know a lot of the people that actually already are on the by name list. That's why I mentioned it from the Oshawa perspective. It just makes no sense to have them, busing back to downtown Oshawa anyways, because that's where the majority of the transportation is. I thank you very much, though. Have a good night.
Okay, from Don Holt. If Sunnycrest was so poor as a nursing home because the HVAC system and the building facility was out of date, what work is being done to the facility such that an outbreak of future proportion does not put the new residents in a similar situation?
Mold and asbestos.
Okay, please.
No, but is it
Please.
true that it has mold and asbestos? Yeah, so where's the certificate of somebody that went and checked it out? Where's the investigation report?
You finished?
No, I want to know if it was investigated for mold and mildew.
Okay, all right.
The portion of the facility that will be the first to open is being remediated as we speak, and I did discuss that in my presentation, as did Stella. The region has a very large and experienced works department that is taking the lead on this, is in full compliance with all health and safety and provincial federal regulations around building standards, and we will ensure that as the building is renovated, beginning first with the shelter space, it will be to the highest standards required, and it will be using what we call the Durham standard, which tends to surpass what regular industry would provide.
Okay, now I should have started over here to cover that row complete. Is there anybody? Yes, the lady in the blue there. Sure. Yeah.
Good evening. Homelessness became an issue in the 1980s, but zoning, the bylaw 1784, was created in the 1960s. You had 20 years to create a law that works for shelters, to protect them, and for the houses, residents. This is not right. It's not an appropriate place. We need a new law that says that they're going to be put in a place that's appropriate, a place that works, like an industrial area, not a family neighborhood. I'd like to know which of you lives next to a shelter?
Put your hands up. Who lives near the shelter?
I'm not quite sure what the question was
Do
there.
you live next to one? Would you? Would you
There
live
is a
next
shelter in my neighborhood, yes, there is.
but not next door to you. This is what we're facing. This is what my neighbors are facing. You're not doing us a favor, and you're not helping the homeless either.
I'm going to turn it over to our regional solicitor, but I will remind you, these are human beings that have every right to be
I
treated
want
as
to help them.
human
Trust me, I
beings.
do. We want to help them. We definitely do. We feel that your approach is irresponsible. We feel that you're just jamming everybody into one place, and that's not thoughtful. That's not helpful. We need them. They want smaller shelters. Why do 45 people need 70,527 square feet? Why? Excuse me, that's too big. Are you planning to blindside us again and fill it up completely? Because we don't trust you. We think that's what you're going to do. 100%. Who thinks that? Who thinks that? We don't trust you, and I'll continue reading.
Are you going to read 10 pages?
No,
you've
I will
got
not. I
there?
promise you, I'm almost done. Are laws ever updated for the betterment of our society? I mean, I think we can still park horses in some areas, but at least that doesn't hurt anyone. I would be okay with a horse being parked next to my house, but I would not be okay with a shelter being placed next to my house against my will and to my detriment. Okay? We have evidence. I have spoken with residents who are victims of your plan. Okay? I want evidence from the neighbors. I want to know what the neighbors have to say. Okay? That's it. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure
Vanessa.
there's anything to say in response to that. It's really a comment. Let's move on to another question.
Justice Litter, perhaps we could take a couple more from those who have attended in person. I see a number of hands, if that's okay.
All right, I want to continue down the road that I was on. So, yes, you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Shah Alamgir. I live on 58 Long Drive. There were few questions was not answered. One of them, express of interest to provide operation. Will it be publicly tender or was already tender or invited to among the friends? So this is one question. And second question, region bought it from whom? It was one of the question from the gallery and it was not answered also well. So my question is, was it bought through a competitive process or sole source contract to the friend? Yes. And third question, was any public consultation happen to conclude with this decision to build a homeless shelter? Thank you.
I am not going to release any more on the acquisition. I can tell you it was a negotiated purchase. It was not an expropriation. It was a negotiated purchase. And I think as anyone in the room would realize, it's not in anyone's interest to negotiate real estate transactions in the public domain. I will turn it over to Jason, who will also add to the answer. Thank you.
Because it was very expensive consultation or expensive.
So I certainly appreciate the point that it's an expensive real estate transaction. The region and the regional council has a very clear process that is set out, which specifies how we buy real estate. That process is also in some part dictated by the Municipal Act because we are a creature of the province. So the province of Ontario says how we can purchase real estate. And one of the consequences of that, just like for you when you buy your own real estate, is that we conduct the negotiations with the person we're purchasing the property from in private. Otherwise, you as taxpayers would pay too much for the real estate that we purchase. So that process was followed to the T in this case. A fair market value assessment was done, which is part of that process that the region follows, and the amount that the property was purchased for fell within that fair market value assessment. And that's how the region purchases property, and that's actually how every municipality in the province purchases property. There's no difference whether it's this property, a property for a waste site or a transit depot. The use of the site is not as relevant when we're speaking about how we purchase the property. We follow the process that's dictated by council, that is also partially dictated by the Municipal Act. And so I think that's an important distinction. And the purchase of this property is really separate and apart, I think, from what people want to discuss here today, which is the shelter use. The purchase of the property is actually no different from any other regional property, town property, or municipal property in Ontario that's purchased. There was a question about who it was purchased from and was it an arm's length transaction? Yes, absolutely, it's an arm's length transaction. And when the transaction is concluded, all of the details of the transaction were released in the purchase and sale agreement. So any of you who own a home would have signed a purchase and sale agreement. That document has been publicly released in this case, and it's available. I think it might be posted on the site. So it's a fully transparent transaction when it's completed. It's just not transparent when we're negotiating it.
So the express of interest to for the operation, was it through the sole source or through the invited or through the open tender?
Yeah, an expression of interest is sent out to other providers across the province and through our Built for Zero organization that we partner with. That is how we select our providers, our various service providers in our system today.
That's it. I'm still working my way through.
Mike Lufkins, Scott Street. If I could throw a baseball, I'd probably be able to hit the shelter. This is a quote, or you've been quoted, Elaine. The region cannot cap shelter spaces at 45. However, the region can provide a good faith acknowledgement and commitment that there is no intention to use additional spaces except where circumstances require it. Now, I'm guessing, I'm just going to guess, circumstances required might be, say, January 31st when it's minus 40 out. So what I need to know, and I think it's important to know, if we're going to be opening up further spaces on a cold January night, how many more spaces are we going to open up? And the second part of that question would be, when it does warm up and we release those excess occupants out to, where do they go? Out into the street?
Yeah. So I will take this, this question. So we did commit to 45 spaces in the event of an emergency, because things happen. There could be a fire, people are displaced, or in extreme cold weather. We will expand the shelter depending on the need, but we have other options too across our system. 1635 is not the only location that we would expand to.
So Stella,
And-
I'm more concerned with the exact number, and I think that's
Yes.
important in any business.
important.
You need to have that data in your business plan.
I'll be honest with you, right now, we've said we're going to stay with 45. I don't have an extra number. We haven't gone to that place yet, but we will determine that, and through our work with the liaison committee, we will have that discussion.
Quickly, that really concerns me that you don't have a number and you're going to open up. But Stella, Elaine, thanks for the little information that I got.
No, wrong the same row, please.
Hi, Gabriel Koja, Prince of Wales Drive. I'm sorry, a little bit too nervous now, and I prepared a question here, but I think there are so many discrepancies on your presentation that I'll just go through a couple of questions actually for you. You mentioned that homelessness is the fault of the system, not the fault of the people. So in this case, where is my fault in all this situation? Where is my kid's fault in all this situation? It's the problem, the biggest problem is, and the biggest concern, please don't get us wrong, guys. We want to help, of course, we want to help the homeless. We want to make sure that everybody has a place to stay, a warm place to stay. The biggest problem is, the biggest concern is, there's no insurance whatsoever for our safety. And the main issue is, we don't have the safety. You can't, as much as you want to tell us whatever you want to tell us, you can't tell us exactly, hey, my kids will not play next year with needles in the park, in the playground, on the playground next to the shelter, or they will not find I'm sorry, I'm trying to select my words here. We have a nice ravine right there. We have playgrounds. We have, oh, by the way, people come and play soccer. There are couple of fields, soccer fields there. It will be quite interesting if we'll have these things in 1 year from now, in the same manner as we have them right now. I have the toys, my kids' toys are sitting outside, right in front of my house, no problem. And I'm not worried about the fact that if they will disappear or not. They will not disappear because I know they will not disappear, but it's not going to happen next year from now. The question, actually, let me just jump, I'm sorry, the 3 minutes. I have to go to the next one, the next quote that you have there. You get to choose a neighborhood, but you don't get to choose your neighbors. I'm sorry, but I think everybody's doing their homework before moving to a neighborhood. Yeah, so please take these things out, guys. It's outrageous, really, honestly. It's really outrageous. So the question is, how is your plan? What's your plan actually to eradicate homelessness? What's your plan to, there are so many countries, you mentioned already about the countries that, yeah, we're all dealing with this situation. But we have countries that have a very low number of homelessness. Why? Take Japan, take Finland, take Netherlands. There are many other countries, just these three, just a few, you know? Please do your homework before you move on to this thing. And try, please, try to think about us as well. You took us out from your equation completely. And that's not fair, honestly. Thank you.
Again, I think that's more of a comment than a question, so let's move on. I'm still working my way through here.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chris, and I live here in the Whitby area. Questions. Why housing first?
So of all the studies that have ever been done on how best to end homelessness, Housing First outperforms every single other approach using control group studies. So there's a greater likelihood that people will access housing and stay housed through Housing First than any other approach.
Oh, excellent. Now, as far as those underlying issues go, what does housing affect the ability to deal with those other issues?
Excellent question. So again, studies have shown, and my experience would show, that people are more likely to be able to deal with struggles with mental health, their historical trauma, their substance use, access to employment, improving their life skills, et cetera, if they have the security and stability of a place to call home.
Thank you. And one last one. In your opinion, would you say that this audience is discriminatory? Hang on, let me rephrase. I'm sorry, it's a little hard. These people that are on the bottom, they need our help. We can't say you can't come, you come, but you can't come. I've been there, I know it. I used to buy drugs there. I get it.
I'm sorry. I think we've allowed other individuals to make their statements without being interrupted. Please allow the individual to finish.
In your experience, the housing philosophy, is it the kinder, gentler way to deal with our homeless population?
So once upon a time, we used to try to make people go to treatment first before they got access to housing, or to have to go through a life skills program to get access to housing, or anger management classes, or AA programs, or prove that they were taking their meds, or get a job. A whole bunch of things used to be the norm. And interestingly, when people started looking at two factors, one, does that actually get the best results? And two, is it the most cost effective? The answer to both of those were no. And that's why there's been such a strong push. I mean, we could go back decades, but I'll say in this country, particularly the last 15 years, towards the only known cure to homelessness is housing. So when we have shelters, when we have street outreach, when we have day services and meal programs, all of that is orienting the wraparound services to help that person access housing and then continue to support them so they can be the best version of themselves.
Better tell them again, champ.
You didn't read? I'm not going to keep going. Do you have a question? No. Okay. So let's go down here. We're going to start now in the second row.
There we go. I was waiting for the red light. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Kahayas. I'm actually coming up here. I'm a little bit confused, and I want a little bit more clarity on the purchase. So I have two-part questions. So Jason, this might be towards you. I'm a real estate agent almost 20 years now, and typically when someone sells their house, we tell them, hey, you may want to get 3 appraisals done on the property to get an evaluation of the property. And based on that, you usually pick which agent you decide, or based on the price and the information you have in front of you, you decide an evaluation on the property. 1635 was on the market for 4 months, listed for $1. In that time period, there were multiple offers put in on the property. And in that time period, the highest price in an open market to everyone available, they received $8 million. Property closes, and end of story. The gentleman who purchased the property was moving forward with whatever he was going to do with the property, and the property was no longer available for sale. The region steps in, purchases the property for 71% above market value. So a market value is estimated by time on the market. And I want to just understand, you said you had an appraisal done or you had staff do it. How many appraisals did you have on the property to evaluate the purchase price of $13.7 million versus the $8 million which it got on an open market? Can you explain that? Just for clarity.
I am sorry, that is not a question we're going to answer. We're here today to talk about any issues around the shelter.
No, she's absolutely right.
Okay.
There is, sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
All
That
right.
was my one question. I wanted, that's fine.
You guys should be investigated for like
I don't think we're going to get very far if we start insulting everybody in the room. So please, if you want to finish this, and we seem to be on a path where we can hear from everybody, we're going to have some order. It does not help to have these kind of interjections, and it does not help to insult people who are trying to help. She's giving you the only answer she can
That's
give
fine. That was my one question. I have the second part of the question was for Iain and for Mr. Henry here. Oshawa has been dealing with a homelessness situation for decades, and you've come to us to say, hey, listen, we have a solution to help this. And again, the door is wide open. The homeless shelter, the homelessness is not going to end anytime soon. We don't seem to have a grasp on what it is to end this situation. I can completely understand that situation. But what I'm asking is, for decades, they've been dealing with this. And as a previous mayor, current mayor, you, Mr. Iain, Oshawa, it seems like it's gotten worse, and you've had time to fix this. And you're telling us that 1635 is going to fix this or help us, but you've had decades to work on this thing in Oshawa, and it's not happened. So I'm asking you, what is going to be different here from all the years that have happened in Oshawa that you can fix this?
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am John Henry. Most of you know that. So the issue of around housing. So I'm going to speak about the entire region. So we have challenges in every municipality, all 8 municipalities, from the Lakeshore to Brock Township, from the Rouge to Clarington. It's not just an issue in Oshawa. It's an issue in each municipality. I can tell you that this council has endorsed the actions that we've taken, and we've written the leaders of the 3 parties asking to meet on a national crisis that is happening from coast to coast in this country. That we are doing, and what we are trying to do is to help the people in our community. But if every community in Canada is having the exact same problem, then it's a national crisis. Call it what it is.
Agreed.
In 5 years, before there was any technology in this country, they built a railroad from coast to coast. No technology. And yet we can't get the leaders of this country to sit around a table. And I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about Mayor Chow, I'm talking about Mayor Hamilton, I'm about Mayor Halifax, the Mayor of Calgary, Vancouver, Victoria, to sit down and talk about the real issue of homelessness in this country and put a plan in place to fix it. Property taxes were never designed to pay for the challenges that we're having. I can tell you 2 weeks ago, we had 70 asylum seekers on a Saturday come into Durham Region. On a Saturday, on top of the 233 that were already here. We didn't invite them. They came here, and we're doing our best to support them. But when you lack leadership at the federal level, and I'm an independent, I'm not tied to a political party, that will not sit down with the mayors and chairs of the GTHA and across this country to talk about the real issue of homelessness, it is a tragedy. It's shameful. People shouldn't be living on the street. It's harvest season in Durham Region right now. Our farmers produce the food that feed our province, our communities, and our country. We have challenges, big challenges, but we as elected officials here, the mayor can't fix it, I can't fix it, council can't fix it. We're trying to do that. What we have written, I act on behalf of the chairs and mayors of the GTHA. I sit on Marco, the mayors on the Large Urban Mayors Council, the mayors in the north are on the rural councils, all delivering AMO, the Association of Municipalities, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, are all sending the same message that I'm sending to you right now. And the system is broken. And but they leave it us, and you heard a federal minister say the other day on national TV that housing is a municipal responsibility. With no money and no funding and no plan to fix it. Light on crime doesn't work. And I wish I had an answer for you. But staff has said to you, this is about a facility for 45 people.
Right
But
now, and we understand that.
Let me finish. But every day, I'm now dealing with homeless seniors. When one spouse dies, they can no longer carry on, and now they're homeless. Asylum seekers, human trafficking. The challenges that we're dealing with all need someone at another level of government that makes the laws and funds the things that we do. So I'm sorry for the rant, and I accept responsibility for what we're doing now, but I can tell you every mayor in the GTHA and every mayor across Canada is having the same problem, including a meeting I was in yesterday where the challenges are up in Minden and Halliburton, where there are no services, where they push those people down into Peterborough and Lindsay, and those people are pushed down into Durham.
Mr. Henry, I don't think any of us are in disagreement with anything that you have said. I think we all believe in that same statement that you said. I don't think any of us are here. And I understand this.
Enough. Okay, somebody else gets a chance. I think we're on, we're on this row here.
Hi, thanks. My name's Gary Dunsmuir, and I live on Canadian Oaks Drive. And I want to ask a question to everyone here in front of me. And I want to see a show of hands. You're out looking for a house for your family, your 3 kids. You're looking for a good neighborhood with schools, playgrounds, shopping, whatever. And an agent takes you to a few places because we speak about it's not affecting our values of our home. Yet I know that if I'm looking for a home personally, someone says there's a shelter with at least 45 low barrier unhoused people, I'm not looking for that house. So I'd like to see a show of hands from everyone here to see if you would buy that house right next door, like Greenfield is, with 45 to 100 to 200 people. Because I want to see the hands. Let's see the hands. Mayor Roy, is your hand up?
No, it's not a valid question.
It is a valid question. It's exactly why we're here.
It's a question asked, excuse me, it's a question asked to make a political point.
No,
It's
I want
not-
to know. They're saying the price doesn't go down.
it's not-
If it doesn't go down, answer the question.
It's not a question asked looking for information dealing with this particular proposal, this particular
I
project.
disagree with you.
No, it's not an appropriate question, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. No, I thought, here's the news. Right here.
Hi, I'm Diane Mackey. I live on Yarmouth Court. Do you know the exact amount of asbestos in the building? And what is the health and safety protocol if the human carcinogen is disrupted? I only ask because in a shelter in Lindsay, Ontario, addicts tore through walls of their building to avoid police from arresting them in the hallways.
I wonder if Christine would be comfortable answering that. Christine is a director within our Works Department, manages our construction and maintenance program for all regional facilities, and is ensuring that all asbestos issues in the building are being properly addressed.
Thank you, Elaine. That was the first thing we did was the DSS to assert what sort of substances in the building. And based on that, with the work that we're undertaking now, all of that has been addressed. And that's why we're taking so long, because we have deficiencies and we're addressing them based on the DSS report.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just working my way through. Okay, just give me a second. Yeah, this lady here.
My name is Kathy Perry, and I live at 75 Canadian Oaks Drive in Whitby. I think there's an issue here that needs to be explained. People are not against the shelter. We want the shelter. Everyone should have a home. The problem that we have is a low barrier shelter. Studies have shown that low barrier shelters do better in industrial areas where they can't have drug dealers, where they can't prey on teens, and all that kind of activity that goes on. So why wouldn't we put the low barrier part of the shelter, say on Hopkins Street or in another industrial area within Durham Region? Millwork comes to mind, yes.
This location was selected due to community need and to address community needs as we develop our housing plans, and we're coming to the conclusion of our recent 10-year housing plan. We are looking at how we address needs across the region. So you've probably heard about supportive housing that will be opening in the coming months in Beaverton. We've got a number of renovation projects going on in Oshawa, and many more that Stella can get into in detail. So we are taking a regional-wide approach to this, but we did recognize that there were issues that we needed to address in the Whitby area.
And what are you going to do for the people that are sitting behind that shelter when needles are thrown over the fence and yeah, that's my question. I think all these people could support the shelter if you took the low barrier part out of it.
Okay.
It wasn't really a question, but we can say that we will have, as Stella mentioned in her presentation, a security plan, a lighting plan, 24/7 security on site, and we will also be working with a community advisory committee to assist us on addressing ongoing concerns or issues that may arise in the community.
Security team that's in the library? Yeah. How's the Whitby Library doing? I had to leave Scotiabank because of that area.
Whitby Library, the Whitby Library is not what we're discussing today, please.
My name is Nancy Mello, and I live at 205 Prince of Wales Drive, which is just a short 5-minute walk from the shelter. I have a couple of comments. My first is I agree with so many people here that we're not against a shelter. We're against a shelter in this particular area. We're against a shelter a low barrier shelter in this particular area. I don't feel that the community was taken into consideration when you bought this building. It was available. It was there up for purchase, and it wasn't. The community was not considered when this building was purchased. That's my feeling. So I have a couple of questions. The low barrier aspect of this, housing men and women and possibly children in the same place, just does not sit well with me. I feel very strongly about the needs of women who have been victims of violence and their children who need a safe place. Many of these women are victims because of something. Many of these are victims at the hands of men. And to have them housed in the same place as men, to me, is very disrespectful to that part of our population. I feel as though that this particular area would be well suited for women with children. There are schools, there are businesses that you'd be able to access. So for women with children, I think that this would be a great location. I think about new families who have come to Canada, who have no place to live, who are there seeking a better life, and now they're on the streets. This is another situation where I find that this particular location would be advantageous for that particular group. Now, my other question, those are my comments. The question that I have, somebody had mentioned something about this is a shelter for people who are eventually going to find housing. Are there any statistics that we can have that show that a shelter such as this one, people do leave the shelter, they find something more permanent? Is this a transition, or is this just a place until they go to another shelter? I guess that's my question. Maybe it's a rhetorical question, but I guess that's my question.
Ian, you'd be the person to answer that.
Thanks for the question. So, to be candid, you're right on both parts. Yes, there are some people who will move from one shelter to another, and then maybe within the community and maybe to another part of the country. That definitely happens. In terms of those that exit to housing, this is the primary reason why the region and every Ontario municipality and every community that receives federal dollars has a by name list. So we can track that person, couple, or family, regardless of which shelter they use, or if they are unsheltered, to continue the process of trying to help them access housing. So in terms of the outflow, if the average number of days is 21 days, that doesn't mean 21 days to housing, but it does mean that when we are engaged with people from the moment they show up in shelter to start focusing on long-term housing, that could be things like trying to help them secure their documents. Like if you don't have proof of who you are, a lot of landlords won't rent to you. Or securing income, right? Getting your income supports and benefits in place. So the term that's often used is outflow. What's the outflow from shelter? In most studies that I'm aware of, that's going to be somewhere around 40% will exit to housing. Now, there could be other data out there that I'm just not familiar with, but the studies that I am familiar with show that about 40% will move on to housing. In terms of the other 60%, part of that is going to be they're just not in a house situation or moving towards housing at the time the data is captured, so we don't know anything about their progression. And then the other part is there will be a small percentage, and I would point out in this community when we engage people with lived experience, 95% of the people experiencing homelessness in the community that we interviewed wanted housing. So our hope is that with the right level of wraparound services, we can increase that beyond that 40%, and across the entire community, get everybody who's on that by name list to a place where they actually secure housing.
Okay. I do have a question about what someone called the turnaways. Even on a cold night or whatever, somebody being turned away from the shelter, where do they go? And the reason why I'm asking this question is because there have been 3 different times, I live right across the street from Prince of Wales Park. There have been 3 different times that I've called the Durham Police Services because I've seen somebody that I didn't think belonged behaving in a way that appeared intoxicated or under the influence of something. Today, I called because I saw somebody wandering up Prince of Wales Drive, stumbling, didn't look like they were together, and I never did get through to the police services to report it, and then the person was gone. I have seen people sleeping under the trees. I called about a year ago to say that somebody was sleeping down in Prince of Wales Park. I saw them get out and shake out their things, and they said, well, you know, that it happens. So I'm afraid that that's going to happen more often, especially if people are turned away, and the magnet effect takes over, and people come in thinking that, well, I could get a bed. Maybe tonight is going to be the night that they'll let me in. So those are my concerns. Thank you very much.
No, I went by you. Okay, no. Look, next. Go ahead. I think in the end, the lady conceded it was a comment. We're going to proceed on, okay? No, it was.
Stella can answer with respect to those clients that are not permitted entry.
So you're correct. We do have many turnaways as a result of not having enough spaces in our shelters today, shelters across the system. when they're turned away, certainly there is an opportunity for that particular shelter to call another colleague in another shelter and have the conversation around trying to find and secure something for them. That is something that they do. The shelters have a coordinated access system, and they can communicate to determine where best to place someone. But there are times that people are turned away from shelters because there is no place, or they just, don't fit today because they might be different. They might be from a different community, and that they just don't fit in that particular shelter system. Or they might have a disability and maybe they're not accessible. There could be all sorts of reasons why they're not able to be in that shelter, but they are turned away, and they could be sleeping outside. They could be sleeping anywhere. This happens across Durham.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name's Rita Chung, and I live in Whitby, but I have a couple questions. The first one is just some clarification. So you said this is a 45-bed facility for now, or a 45-bed facility, and you're going to be offering low-barrier shelter services, and that's during the day. Is that correct, 24/7?
It's 24/7.
Okay, so do you know how many people are going to be in that facility during the daytime? Have you anticipated the number of people that would be coming in for those low barrier services?
45 is the number that we've committed to.
But those are 45 beds. So the low barrier
45
service,
people.
45 people. So you said that, so if someone is in the daytime and they want some of those services and you're capped at 45 and you will turn them away?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Unless it's an
Okay.
emergency and we have a conversation with Whitby and our liaison committee and determine some next steps.
So where does this plan right now, your 45 beds or 45 individuals, where does this fit in your whole plan for this facility? Because I'm sure that when this project was proposed, you had a business case, and in order to get funding for where you are now, you would have had a business case developed and approved. You would receive funding. It would be in phases. What is the full picture of this facility? So were you approved for a certain point, or were you approved for the whole facility with the services? And what's the capital costs and operating costs for this facility?
At the committee of the whole meeting in June, Regional Council did approve for us to purchase the facility. They did approve for us to have a 45-bed shelter as the first phase, and they did also approve for us to consult with the community for the rest of the building.
Okay, and what's the operating cost for this 45?
2.5 million.
2.5 million. And is that coming out of a full budget that you have to deal with homelessness, or is it coming out of another area?
We have a homelessness budget. It's close to 28 million, and it's a mix of federal funding, provincial funding, and regional funding for that particular program, homelessness.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Council. My name is Travis Teej, and I'm from the Prince of Wales, or Bluegrass neighborhood. I'm on the Arctic Court. I'll echo the sentiment as well, that it's not a shelter we're against. We're worried about the safety and security of our neighborhood, about some of the types of people that might be drawn in by this, right? I think Nancy talked about the magnet effect, the beacon effect across the region, across the province. We're worried that there are not enough safeguards from what's being planned or what's being communicated with us right now for our neighborhoods. The big ones, the most adjacent ones, are the Bluegrass Meadows community as well as the Greenfield community. There is a question coming at the end of this, I promise. I want to talk about two things. One, there's a lot of information about the safety and security of the facility, cameras, staff, all of that, right? But there's nothing really being talked about what's happening outside of the facility. And that's really what scares everybody, okay? So, and we don't want to discriminate, right? There are a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness, of course. I think we've all had experiences with people the folks that are in a situation that we're afraid of happening in our community. In Bluegrass Meadows, Nancy talked about the soccer field and the playground. There is a ravine, a valley, essentially, okay, that is perfect for encampments. Why would there be an encampment when there's a shelter there, right? Logical question. The beacon effect, overflow, people coming into the community, people leaving the shelter during the day to go and do their drugs, people going there to meet their drug dealers, lots of reasons, right? They need a place to go to. I'm telling you, if you stand at the front of 1635 and look across the street, it's a green oasis, okay? Now, that's one big worry. And now that's just steps away from the actual neighborhood itself, okay? So there's a safety thing. I will get to the question in a second. The other point I want to make about all of this, which maybe hasn't been touched on yet, is mental health of the community and children as well, all right? It is transforming a neighborhood that somebody said they leave their toys on the yard and all of that, right? I leave my door unlocked sometimes when I go for a walk. I don't have to worry about what's in my car. If my kid's stuff is on the front lawn, I don't really care, right? 2 months from now, I'm going to. And I've lived in these neighborhoods. I've lived right beside Strawn House in Toronto. I've lived on Jarvis down from Regent Park. And the effect that this has on you daily of, oh, well, I got out of my car. Better make sure nothing's in there that can be stolen. Oh, I better close my door. I better bring everything into my house. I better make sure my kid's not standing out there on the driveway. Oh, I have guests for the weekend. Well, I better tell them that I live in this neighborhood where this is a major concern and they have to have their cars cleaned. And this stuff that just plays in on your mind day after day, week after week, month after month. My questions are this, having painted an elaborate story. One, on the security factor. It doesn't seem like there's a continuum from the shelter and the security plans that are in place there out to the community. There's probably a divide between the region and the town over who owns that. So question number one, I'd like some clarity on that, on where the responsibilities lie for that, and what types of plans are already in place, or is that part of the terms and conditions in the agreement you're working on? Two, there should also be consideration for the mental health of the community members. It's all over your PowerPoints for the residents, but it's not anywhere for the community members. That is, so I guess that's my comment. There should be, or can there be, or will there be, if this does go low barrier, right? Which of course, like I said, we'd prefer it not because it would take all of these fears away. Thank you.
So thank you for that question. So you're asking when someone leaves the shelter? When
Yeah.
someone leaves the shelter, they're an individual, they're their own person like the rest of us. So
Of course.
we don't control their actions when they leave the shelter. We are
Right.
hoping that by having day programming and not asking them to leave in the morning, as some shelters need to because of their organization and their processes, that by doing that, they will stay and remain and be part of the programming. But we really don't control people. And today, there are people who are unsheltered living in the community, on the streets. We have people in bus shelters. We have people in ravines today. So our hope is that they will come in because there's no place for them to go.
Right.
So yeah, I can answer that part. And mental health for the community, I'm hoping through the liaison committee, we will do some work together to determine what the community needs so we can help them work with us to make this project a success and to integrate members into the community because they are your neighbors.
Okay.
Too.
And that hope can diminish very quickly. I get what you're saying. You're hoping the programs will keep them sticking there, right? But just remember, you're creating a super concentrated area of people that we believe is going to grow to 200 people, right? How, just looking at numbers, right? It's just it's not possible that everybody's going to be committed to a program or to staying indoors or whatnot and not doing any of the things like in the ravine, like I talked about there, right? That's the concern.
Can I
got-
just
yeah,
put
please go
just
ahead.
one thing,
Yeah.
just right off the bat? We have no intention of having a shelter for 200 people. It's not a best practice. We have never, ever said that. We've always said 45. We're looking at what the rest of the building could be used for, and one of the speakers before you talked about, possible shelter for victims of domestic violence, for new families that are new to the country. All of those are great ideas that we're seeking from the community, and we will come back with a plan. But the shelter plan is for 45 people in that one area of the building. We are not proposing to go beyond that. It's not a best practice. It's not in our interest not to do best practices. So I think we need to put a cap on that right away.
Okay. I have one more thing just to play really quickly. I know, sir. Just please. I know I am. This I think it will impact. I understand. This is how close the path in the ravine is to a schoolyard. Okay, that is less than 100 feet from the ravine. Okay, I'll leave it at that, but that is the biggest worry I think my community has, is that ravine, encampments, the drug use, the children. And I know I've gone over time, so thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hi, Lori Hughes, 5 Greenfield Crescent. I just want to know why, is this a done deal and we're just here for nothing? So whatever we say doesn't matter anyway. That's what I want to know.
We did receive approval to purchase the property and to create a 45-bed low-barrier shelter.
Yeah, I
And
want
to
to know.
engage the community for the rest of the building. What kind of housing, what kind of programs and services outside of the 45-bed shelter.
Right.
That's the approval and that's the mandate we've been given.
So that's definitely going in, so no matter how many meetings we have, it's useless. Yeah, basically, right?
We're here to listen to
No,
your concerns.
just tell me that I'm wasting my time and this is useless, because anything we say, you're not going to do anything to fix it. And this is a Band-Aid solution for the homeless. And I work in the city of Toronto, and I know what these people go through. And I know how the government is treating these people, how they shut their doors on everybody through the pandemic, CAMH included. Not on meds, no place to live, and now all of a sudden we have a problem. And this is a Band-Aid solution that the government is doing at the moment. There's nothing we can do for our neighborhood and our safety of our children. So all of us being here isn't going to do squat. So thanks. Thanks for building in an industrial section.
Okay, it's 10 after 8. We're going to just wait, okay? I can see all your hands. Give me a second. We're going to go to 8:30, and then we're going to stop. So we've covered everything, every row except the two, the one that this, yeah, the one in the back. All right, just hang on.
I'm terrified. I'm not going to say my name because you guys can look me in the eye, please. Thank you. I'm not going to say my name because I want to remain anonymous. I'm scared. So I want to say I'm not a villain. I believe in shelters. I believe in treatment centers. I believe in mental health resources to help people. My motivation to stand here tonight stems from my own sobriety, my proximity to this shelter, which is 15 meters, and my experience as a survivor of sexual assault. To create a successful environment and a safe environment, you guys need resources. Addiction treatment can take up to 6 months at minimum if you're on the cancellation list and get lucky. That's for people who want to get sober. And if they change their mind, because it'll happen. Anyways, that's another topic. So, sorry, and also I used to live in close proximity to Cornerstone, which I only lived actually 400 meters or 500 meters away from Cornerstone. And this new shelter is 15 meters away. I left Whitby, or I left Oshawa, because I found crack needles in my garden. Things were stolen in my house. And that's all fine, right? That's okay because it was just me. I'm a single mom. I had a baby at the time. So I bought a house. I emptied everything that I had and bought a house in Whitby, thinking I would be safe. Know what happened? A week before I was coming to Whitby, my dog was stolen by a homeless man with attempted murder charges. Luckily, we found her. Luckily, we found my dog. The police didn't help me find my dog, which is okay. You can, yeah, I know you don't want to hear this. The police didn't help me, which is fine because they're stretched thin, as you know from the chief of police who spoke on June 28th. They're overworked, but anyways, the guy showed up. I was so pumped. I was like, I found my dog, sweet. And I'm only talking tonight because I think this might be the only opportunity I can look you guys in the eye. So I apologize, I'm taking a long time. The guy showed up at my house while I was home, like with my baby, and I was packing to come to Whitby. Luckily, I called Durham Region Police and they were there at that point. So another point I want to make is that addiction treatment can, like I said, take the time. I'm so sorry, everybody. And I'm aware of the dangers associated with untreated mental illness. I understand not all individuals with mental illness are dangerous. I have a list of mental illnesses myself. I understand, I know not everybody is dangerous, whatever. But my experience with sexual assault was by a person with unmanaged schizophrenia. And now I'm going to be living 15 meters away from this. I'm terrified. I can't even sell my house. No one will buy it. I can't move. No one will buy it. I'm stuck here. I'm trapped. Sorry, I just spit everywhere. I'm just so upset. I have nothing to do. I feel so powerless. You guys have taken that away from me. And I'm not a NIMBY. I'm not. I'm scared. And I'm scared for the women in there. Like me. I can't imagine that. So my question is, how many of you have driven down Greenfield? And my second question is, how do you sleep at night?
Yeah, thanks for nothing.
How do you sleep?
They haven't answered the question.
Somebody come up there.
Forgive me, Justice, but are they not going to respond to her questions?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you sleep?
Council will not respond to this young lady's questions.
How many of you have Greenfield shelter?
We have all been down Greenfield, and I think the second question was somewhat rhetorical. So I will assure you, though, that we have all been in the neighborhood. We've all visited the site.
You haven't even been there! Why didn't you raise your hand? Are you scared of what people are going to say? Narcissists are not scared. You can't get from having to be in that shelter with those people.
Are you okay, right?
Let's go. The problem is none of you guys live on Greenfield Crescent. You won't have to deal with it.
We do, yeah.
I haven't slept for 2 months.
I think we have another individual that would like to ask a question. Can I suggest we turn over to her?
You know, at least someone who lights their house on fire can get insurance, but I'm just an asshole who hates homeless people.
That was rude.
Thank you guys. Thank you. I hope you see me in your nightmares.
This is what you're creating. We believe in shelters. We believe in helping
It's the wrong spot.
Okay, all right, please. Please.
No.
Why do you want us to believe? You're the ones that did it to us.
We feel unsafe.
You're being
Hear us.
unsympathetic.
We're telling you guys we feel unsafe.
And you're
Help us.
ignoring us.
You're ignoring us.
And there's thousands.
It's all lip service here.
All right. Yeah.
I think Justice Lederer, we're probably ready to close for the evening, if you don't mind. Thank you.
That means you're wrong.
The problem, I'm sorry. All right. All right. You know what? I've tried to explain to you at the beginning. You do not advance your cause when you interrupt. You do not advance. All right. Okay. Okay. All right. You know what? Think probably we are finished. There's no. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Accord him the courtesy that this deserves. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, guys. I apologize. I've been here. You guys have seen me. I'm probably going to be a stallmate during this whole process, and I will happily share my thoughts. And I think Mayor Roy and the council members from Whitby know I can't speak for everybody else here, but I'm here for ending homelessness, not temporary shelters or Band-Aid solutions. And I will say, you don't want to assume, but I think everybody's here for that same result. We're not looking for temporary. Are we safe there? Okay. My couple of concerns are related to the misuse of tax dollars. And Chair Henry, you were completely right. All levels of government need to get together. Completely right. At the same time, sir, we spent $40 million over budget on a sports complex. Sports, homelessness. I don't know. I'm not sure. Guys, in fairness, let's not clap. I followed all the rules to be here, so let's please respect that. And for all those people who are for the shelter, the address isn't 1635 Dundas, it's 22 Greenfield. So I'm just going to repeat that, it's 22 Greenfield. Now, some of the studies that were based, Ian, and I don't mean to be personal, and everyone knows that I'm here to help people that are experiencing homelessness. I mentioned it before, I've also lost my home. The studies that you mentioned were not based post-pandemic. They're not based on the drugs, that are on the streets today. They're much more difficult. Agreed? Okay. Also, again, not personal, but org code, is that what it is? Sorry? Org code is the organization?
That is the name of the company, yes.
All right. So the company also, I believe, did some consulting in Timmins?
I have done
Right,
consulting.
and everybody in Timmins on May, I think it's May 2020, 2022, in the CTV News article suggests that they don't want the shelter there.
I have not consulted on the shelter in Timmins.
Well, there's a CTV News article that mentions you tied to that. So I'm just, and again, I'm not saying that's the case, but it does. And I just learned that actually about 15 minutes ago. There are other things that we need to discuss, but most importantly, again, no disrespect to your report, but I'd like a second opinion. I go to the doctor for the same reason. When we mention human rights all the time, we avoid talking about those people who are minorities and those who have disabilities trying to access these types of services. So I think the number 45 is arbitrary. We've decided this somehow, I'm not sure exactly how. That in itself is, to me, seems a little selective. You didn't buy the building for $13.7 million to only put 45 people in it. It's just kind of logic here at the same time at the moment. So what I want to know is, when there's other tools that we have available, like rent controls, rent evictions, and I know some of them are provincial jurisdiction, why are we not lobbying them? And I mentioned this to the mayor, and I will say the mayor of Whitby did support, and I think it was, I'm not sure if you've contacted the mayor of Grand Prairie, Alberta yet. Thank you, thank you. And I genuinely believe you want to help, just so you know. I can't speak for everybody else, right? You're trying, and I understand it's complex. But my daughter won't be able to go to the park along with all my kids that these people represent. Those are my kids. All the seniors that can't go to the park. I've been in security for a very short period of time, and I can tell you, you know what the most consistent call I get is, how do we solve the homelessness issue in security? And I can tell you that, Stella, you mentioned $2.5 million. The security for 2 security guards, tactical use, with use of force training, mental health first aid. I know you're going to do an RFP, which means it's going to go to the lowest bidder. Will cost you approximately $500,000 just for 2, 24/7. Okay, roundabout. So when we're spending all this money, and Chair Henry, I know we can't use property taxes continuously, but it's tough to swallow. For the next 2 years, we're going to be facing almost 10%, and we're getting no results. All we want to actually see, I think everybody, is actual results. And whether it's Cornerstone, Timmins, Beaverton, whatever it is, we want to be involved. And the only thing that I would like, it's not a question, because I'd like to participate along with my brothers and sisters on Prince of Wales, whether it's on Nickel, whether it's on Greenfield, within 2 to 5 kilometers of radius, is we want to be a part of that negotiation process, please. Because we deserve a seat at that table. This is for my daughter's future. I will be at every single meeting. I will respect you all, and I will help alongside of you to solve this issue. I sincerely will. But I'd like a second opinion in regards to it. I really would. Because all the other data that we've seen doesn't suggest some of the things that you've suggested. And when it comes to service providers, oh God, I used to spend a lot of time in risk management and insurance, and the word liability is really easily thrown around. You're going to bring upon a service provider who's very likely, and if you ask service providers right now, they're short-staffed. So how are we going to solve that? Well, how are we going to get a service provider who was able to get the right people in there? They're not, because there's a shortage there. And having the right people costs even more money. So there isn't a model, actually, where it's 1 meter from your home. There isn't a model for that. And I'm going to say this for my brother up here, and I'm not going to mention his name. His son's my nephew now. His window, innocently, without him doing anything, faces the front of this building. And I'm not going to ever say that everybody who's homeless has a problem or is a drug dealer or does drugs or any of those things, because I know that's not true. I've spent time living downtown, all across Toronto. That's not it. Every single person in this building is a human. But when you make me think that you bought a building that had mold in it and it had asbestos in it, and then you tie it to homelessness, it makes me think that we're just throwing the problem in a building, and we call that humanity. That's not humanity. It's not humanity to ignore us. And I mean this with due respect. Am I not standing on a mic that we paid for? Am I wrong? I urge you guys to just relook at this. And at the town level, I do urge you guys to vote for an ICBL for the couple of members of council here, because we need a pause, we need a refresh, and then we can come to a solution. And Chair Henry, I'm telling you right now, okay, on behalf of many people and residents, we will work with you. We will. But putting the measures that you're putting in place without us even knowing about it, that's just unfair. And I know you don't wake up in the morning to be unfair. I know that. I've done my homework about you, sir. And I just deep down believe that you want to make a difference. And I see your frustration with the other levels of government. But the $40 million that's happening, whether it's this or as John very well pointed out, I would love someone to buy my house within 4 months during this market at 71%. And I'll finish with this. It's not in our backyard when it's on our front lawn. Thank you.
You know, I was going to say, I really think that's a good point to end. We've had a long night. You've said a lot of things for the councillors here and a lot of things for the staff to think about. I think you've had, just with these last two speakers, a good counterpoint on the kinds of issues, the kinds of ways people are viewing this, one on a very emotional way and one on a very logical way. I think it's a good time to end. Unless there's a really serious objection, I want to stop now. Okay, all right, thanks.